Hey, everybody, welcome back to Pro AV today. I'm your host, Ben Thomas. If you know my story at all, my story is heavily involved in church technology, especially when it comes to things like live streaming and production and AV setups, things like that. But when you look at technology, it's actually informing our houses of worship really in a lot of different places, right? Whether that's facilities management, volunteer scheduling, things like tithing. All of these ecosystems now have been brought together. And historically, when you look at the world of churches and house of worship, it's been a little bit slower and a little bit more reluctant at times to adopt these technologies. So, wanted to have a conversation today with someone who really has not only an incredible voice for the industry, but someone who has an incredible vision for the industry. And that's Collin Jones over at Pushpay. Collin, thanks so much for coming on the show today.
Yeah, thank you, Ben. And it's been fun getting to know you in the process. And I don't know if people know, but Lake Point's a great church, and it's fun to have that connection too.
Absolutely. Yeah, that was one of the churches that I'd spent some time at previously and had the opportunity initially back, I think probably 10, 15 years ago to get a chance to meet you. But for those folks who don't know, Collin, you helped launch the Resi brand, right? One of the most prolific, still one of the most prolific brands in church live streaming. If you would just give us a little bit of background about how you got into the industry and maybe how you landed where you're at now.
Yeah, so we were at Chase Oaks Church, which is a few miles away from Lake Point in North Dallas, and we had a campus and two guys, one named Paul, and then the other Brad. So Paul Martell and Brad Reitmeyer. One of them was working at Cisco, the other one was at Hewlett Packard, and we didn't have anything that could stream well over the public internet. So we had two lines of gigabit fiber. But and I think it was even an MPLS type connection, like dedicated network to the other campus. But we would still have blips, and then the video would stop, and there'd be 200 people in the room looking at a frozen man on the screen. And people didn't like, some people did, but a lot of people didn't like the idea of the video campus at first. They liked the idea of it being closer to their home and their community and neighboring well. But video is one of the obstacles that we had to get over, right? And so that didn't help us at all launching campuses. So they built a solution that uses like a short delay and makes it statistically perfect on the other side. So nobody knows that it's delayed, but and this is what's called resilient streaming protocol. It's patented, and it resends and corrects video. And then a few years later, that made a lot of sense as everybody started streaming onto devices like phones and all the social medias and your own platforms and your own apps and TV apps, et cetera, to do use the same resiliency online, because 70% of people are gone by the second buffering wheel. And so we had that product that was growing pretty good. And then COVID happened, and then 50% of churches that had that, immediately went to 100. So they had to get it going in, 5 days. That was a crazy time for us. And now, I think streaming and video and media is becoming a bigger deal in churches. So now, certainly video and on-demand video, live streaming, all of the above, churches are realizing kind of the power of content, and both training their existing members, and helping them with growth, and also, bringing in new people.
Well, I love that your roots really are in that live streaming and broadcast world, right? Because we actually both share very, very similar stories. And what was cool about being on staff at a church is it's easy to be centrally focused on whether it's the video production, whether it's the streaming, the online campus, things like that. But what happens is when you're embedded there, you start to become privy to some of the other things that happen, right? Whether it's the tithing tools or the facilities management, the room scheduling, things like that. And that's one of the things, too, that I wanted to ask about, right? Obviously, Pushpay, which now is kind of the parent company of Resi, offers a lot of those things. And it's really interesting from a production standpoint. Those are often things we didn't think about. But how are some of the ways, or really what are some of the ways that you're seeing folks, whether it's getting in through the live streaming gateway, but what are some of the ways that you're seeing folks really adopt these larger use cases of technologies in churches?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think, zoom out. We did a 2022 State of the Church technology, where we surveyed a bunch of different churches and what technologies they use, what they're going to use in the future. And there were some interesting data points in that kind of help. I think right now what we learned, one of the things that we learned from there is that people are really interested in the integration and consolidation of those tools to get a data story for a person, right? And so to know that, at scale, right? But to know that, hey, we can move people into next steps. So these people that maybe haven't attended yet, we can hopefully get in to a campus, or who haven't been in a group yet, we can hopefully get them involved or volunteering, whatever. And, so I think like, 10, 15, the last 10, 15, 20 years, you had a lot of people buying technology to kind of solve problems from efficiencies. Like, hey, I want to, be able to manage my members easier and email them easier. So we're going to get a people management solution. And then now probably most people have solutions, and they're worried about the strategic growth part of it more, which is fun. So like, how can I, know and grow my members better? And so at Pushpay, we have a solution called Church Stack, which is basically like our one ecosystem, one data that carries forward, that has, tons of different features like an app and people management and giving and, streaming's, all of a part of that. And they all integrate in different layers. We're investing a lot in integration right now because, they're all different solutions that we're bringing in together. But, things like, features like call to action buttons on the stream, right? That then take you to pages that are relevant, right? For that, what that user's watching. There's different, we're working a lot on our analytics right now to where you can tell, what's really going on in your church. I think that COVID created a lot of confusion and change for churches, and we're all just trying to figure it out right now. So, we had online attendance go crazy. Like some people during Easter that would normally have 5,000 people watching had 100,000, right? All of a sudden. And then after COVID, not as many people are in the room as for most churches as they were before. They're coming back, and it's steadily growing. And some churches are higher than before COVID, but most aren't. Most don't have that story. And online attendance is still going pretty strong, not as high as it was, but still pretty strong. And so we, our whole church really turned, or maybe 20 to 50% of our church turned over, right? And so you have some engagement challenges there that technology can help solve.
Well, I want to talk about a little bit more about the physical manifestation of the technology too. We've spent some time obviously talking about platforms and back-end providers. One of the biggest conversations really that we've been having for 20 plus years is technology on stage or technology in the actual worship experience itself. On a high level, talk about some of the ways maybe that live streaming technology, whether it's through lighting or a scenic design, has actually been elevated, right? So whether it's I need to buy more appropriate lighting for my staging, or I need to make sure that there's actual depth of field. What are some of the ways that those platforms have actually continued to inform the physical manifestation of that worship experience?
Yeah, for people not in the church AVL audio video lighting world, it blows people's minds when they come into most of these churches experiences and stages. And so like now there's a big trend towards cinema cameras, right? So like a typical modern church would have some broadcast or cinema cameras, like Chase Oaks, and just moved to red, which look pretty great. And and video switchers and lighting and movers, and sometimes even some moving camera systems that are pretty complex. And then all of the things, right? Audio boards, etc. PAs now, immersive audio is even a thing. Some people are doing some immersive audio strategies, which are pretty cool. And you can use Resi helps with that because you can send different audio channels to different campuses. So yeah, I think things during COVID really exploded from an AVL experience in churches. And now, I think most people know like there's not much patience for audio and video quality to be bad, not because people aren't patient, just because the world progressed so fast. And when you're watching videos online, the things that we're used to watching have really great audio video quality. And so it took churches a while to come up to that. And COVID, I think, is the bump that they probably needed for the average church to actually invest in that, and I think it paid off probably. Now people can actually listen to their messages, right? In room and out of it. So,
well, one thing I always love too about churches, and this is typically where you start drawing some hard differentiations between like traditional AV verticals and the house of worship, and even some of the nonprofit stuff as well, is so much of what happens in churches and even technical theater applications and nonprofits and things like that is so heavily volunteer driven. that the AVL world has had to adapt dramatically to make the user experience simplified, right? Whether that's through live streaming, right? Now I've got GUIs and interfaces literally on a laptop where I can run all my switching, I can run all my lower thirds. Shout out Pro Presenter, by the way, because Pro Presenter saved me a million times. Renewed Vision, you guys are the best. I don't know if I'm allowed to say that. You guys didn't pay for this though, so I guess I'm allowed to plug another product. But
Well,
no,
no, they're
it's
actually a big partner, so you can stream to Resi from ProPresenter.
see, there
Uh,
you go. See,
yeah. So, and ProPresenter is awesome. Yeah.
I always tell people that, like, so this, by the way, is not a paid segment by any stretch of the imagination. People don't pay to be on this show, so we can have good conversations. But I, it's just so funny to look at that technology, right? Because I grew up in traditional broadcast settings and live event settings where it was almost a crime to run things off of a laptop, right? And everything was, I had to have my massive consoles, and I've got to have I've got to have all my SDI and my fiber and my Triax run directly to my cameras and don't even mess with Ethernet. And we literally have simplified all of these things because it's well, now technically it can be done, but we have so many different people in our communities, whether it's the volunteers or whatever, operating these systems that have been historically so technologically advanced. Like how have you seen some of that? And even from the Resi side, how are some of the ways that you guys have been able to adapt to that?
Yeah. I mean, I think if if you take Lake Point, from my understanding, they used to be on satellite, right? Which is
Yep,
nuts.
all SAT campuses.
Yeah. Which, if you think of, that's a crazy amount of infrastructure. You have to have encoders and decoders and dishes and adjustments to the dishes, whether they're automatic or not. And you have to pay for satellite time. And it's a pretty massive undertaking, right? And there's no ease to installing infrastructure like that. The volunteer can't can't do that unless they work for a broadcast company or something on the side, which is also the benefit that churches have, is everybody wants to help for free, which is awesome. But and your point about technology getting so much easier because of volunteers, you're right. And it's also a cost thing. Like churches can't pay as much for either the staff or the actual technology, right, as some of these other budgets. And so it's forced innovation. And you take ProPresenter, like you can, even 3 years ago, you couldn't do as much on ProPresenter as you can do today. Just with, you can run multiple screens, LED walls, you can stream all from one device, right? And it's always a resource thing, so you got to be careful and test it. But pretty crazy how many different devices you had to have even 3 to 5 years ago for something that you could do with one machine now.
Well, it's so interesting too, and I'll stick on that for a second because I remember there was a studio that I was building for a cable news contributor probably 5 or 6 years ago, and I spec'd in ProPresenter, right, because they needed to be able to change their TV backgrounds. In some cases, they were running their own show, running their own lower thirds, and software and technology, Resi very much included in this, by the way, was kind of shoehorned and pigeonholed into this is a church software, right? This is only good for this. And the reality is as we've evolved, you're exactly right, whether it's from a cost standpoint or a usability standpoint, a lot of those technologies have been assimilated into the larger ecosystem of business, right? And even from a Pushpay standpoint too, talk about some of the ways that you've seen that technology evolve and people even outside of traditional house of worship and volunteer nonprofit spaces adapt and use that tech.
Yeah. And Resi has a lot of corporate customers. We have a lot of schools, a lot of different random corporate use cases, like things like Spotify and Camping World and, a bunch of concert and music venues, some really cool, orchestras around the world that need good quality production. And then, things like we're less common in sports because of the delay, but we do a lot of we have the pickleball and, things that people aren't getting ESPN notifications on their phone. Resi can do well. So Spartan races used to be a big one that, they're going out to all these crazy places and streaming stuff. And so, yeah, there's a lot of fun use cases. And as you know, in the AVL world, you get into a lot of funny and cool situations. So I remember in the beginning of COVID, Tech9 is a big Resi customer, and he would do all of his concerts, and I would have never listened to Tech9, but it's pretty cool. And there's a lot of just random things like that. And on Pushpay, like they have quite a bit of the, like in the military kind of applications, like the chaplains and or the chapels and different things like that. And so those are cool use cases. And yeah, I think obviously like technology just spans so widely, right? Like if you're talking about like financial services, you have different things specific for them, but with kind of audio video lighting technology, there's no real difference between a church setup and a theater setup or a concert venue setup. So yeah, and a lot of the venues rent them out too. So I don't know if you guys did that at Lake Point, but it's more and more common now for churches to want to use their building throughout the week, and so they'll build them, not only from like a architecture standpoint, to be used throughout the week by different conferences or concerts or whatever, corporate meetings, but also they'll build out their tech stack to where people can come in and use the existing tech stack.
I did more convocations and graduations and concerts and all kinds of stuff maybe than I did actual services itself, because you're right. I mean, the demand for these technologies, yeah, it's hilarious because the demand for these technologies and obviously space is so high, and that's one of the things too, especially in a post-COVID world. If you go to the NABs and shows like that, TABs, so many different great organizations, especially on the broadcast side, you see that there's been this focus towards usability and ease of use and just simplicity, right? We've moved largely away from the, okay, I need 17 engineers to install this, and then they've got to be there just in case everything needs troubleshooting. Now it's, you plug in, don't shoot me for saying this, but you plug in an HDMI cable, and in most cases you're good to go. Like, so it's insane. But last question here, and then we'll wrap. My motto for technology is that we leverage technology to empower human experience, right? And that may not be more true than in church or house of worship or even nonprofit settings, right? Talk about some of the ways that not only through live streaming, but also maybe some of that AVL, as well as just even some of those human resources technologies, help really serve the attendance, the audience community, things like that.
Yeah, I think about our app. So we have a really cool app. In churches, I think right now 68% of churches have apps, which, that's a lot higher than 5 years ago. I don't know the exact number for 5 years ago, but I remember thinking 5 years ago, like, why would a church have an app? I only use 5 apps on my phone. Like, churches just won't have the resources to make it a good experience. Like it probably won't work that well. And the numbers of churches that like have apps, plus like I forget, I probably shouldn't say the church name, but there's this one church, it's not that big, they've had 1 million app downloads, and they use, a lot of people use their app, and it's because they focus on the content side. And I think Market Scale does a great job of this where you work, is and empowering companies to do this, is like, now from a marketing standpoint, like almost every company that wants to reach people or get their brand out has to become a media company to an extent, or at least have a big media content arm, or invest in that in some other way, like hiring a company to do that, doing it themselves. There's lots of ways to do that. And platforms and technologies that make that easier are, greatly increasing. And so I think like we're really focused on that as a company, of how can we do the data in the back end to try to drive people to churches. So, if the church wants to reach more people, how do we help them get their vision, mission out? How do we help them make a difference in their community? And then how do they help know their congregation, right? So at scale, Target can do some really interesting things, right? They're really good at making me buy more stuff. But what if we, churches get to use that for good? So they're really good at helping people volunteer, connect with a purpose, or whatever. And so we're trying to build technology solutions that can do that. And different integrations are really key to that, right? Like with Target, I can buy stuff from in person, online. I can go pick something up. And they don't care what kind of channel I go. They just want the impact of the dollar, right, coming in their pockets. In churches, we don't care what kind of channel, or, we do to an extent, but we just want to help impact your life for good, right? And so the ways to do that across the app, the actual live stream, which is deployed on social medias and your website, and depending on your strategy, and then also like the giving and the volunteering and the check-in, child check-in, all of that stuff can be used together to make more people come back, to make more people get into educational content, to help people get connected in different ways. And so the technology journey, I think, is really key to that. And Pushpay's trying really hard. That's where we're spending all of our time, almost. And of course, security and things like that are big right now too, and taking up a lot of time. But to make that journey for the person coming into the church, way easier than 10 years ago with technology for churches.
Well, Collin, look, we appreciate you coming on the show today. We've got to have you back on. I mean, this is a conversation that we get questions about all the time, especially just with both of our networks being so heavily rooted in houses of worship. These are conversations that we have all the time. I also want to shout out, there's a show here in Dallas that happens, I believe, in October called CFX. Great opportunity for folks to learn a little bit more, follow along with them. But Collin, we appreciate you coming on the show today and sharing some of your insight.
Yeah, thanks so much, Ben. It's great to have the time together.
And we appreciate you all for tuning in and watching our conversation with Collin today. Be sure to subscribe, like, and follow along for the next episode of Pro AV Today.